the senior design principals were sitting around talking about, how they wanted the design to go. And I was there listening and I just thought, I see the solution, here is the solution, but I wasn't saying anything. Having been in the situation before, I just decided, okay, this time, I got the little bravery to say, all right, I'm going to actually say something right now. It may have been the first time they heard me speak. I don't know. And everyone was silent for a few seconds. And then the senior design principal said, yep, that's it. Let's model that. It was also a kind of huge learning lesson for me at the time to say, okay, just put your idea out there. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is people say, no, it doesn't work.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. The response to these interviews has been nothing short of spectacular. We love making them. We really appreciate the support. If you have topics, if you have people you want us to talk to, by all means, please reach out on LinkedIn, reach out on our website, let us know. We're looking to grow this and be able to distribute even better content. This interview is sponsored by the Architectural Foundation of San Francisco. AFSF is a nonprofit that provides technical training and mentorship to middle school and high school students all around the world who are considering a career in design. The mission of the foundation is to enhance awareness and appreciation of architecture and design process in the local community. And today we have with us Lauren Coles from Co-Architects in Los Angeles. Lauren has been a practicing architect for 15 plus years. She is active in 2 AIA chapters in Los Angeles, and she's kind enough to sit down with us today. So Lauren, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Do you mind if we just jump right in? Do you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got here?
Absolutely. So like you said, I've been practicing for about 15 years now. I specialize in mostly higher education, healthcare, and civic work. It's more or less been that for my entire career, although I have taken a few little detours into different project types. I'm currently a project manager, but I started out as a project designer and project architect, and now project manager.
Love it. Awesome. So mostly higher education. Any other, you said you had taken a detour, any other project types in there?
Yeah, I worked on housing for about a year.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's an interesting story, actually.
Yeah.
I started out as an intern in higher education. I went to a higher education office and another more civic oriented office. But when you're a student and maybe younger, I thought my dream would be to go into housing, and so when I moved out here to LA, I thought, what a better place to practice kind of housing architecture, given the kind of, proximity to like modern design and things like that. So I made the switch in around 2009, and it was a really great learning experience, because I think that you may start out when you're younger and think, oh, this is what I'm going to do. That's my dream. And I quickly realized like the difference kind of between housing and more corporate or institutional projects suited me more. The institutional projects suited me more than the kind of private housing projects. So
Gotcha.
I don't regret it, but it's something I've really learned from.
It's a very common tale, right? I think there's a lot of pressure when you're younger to have this idea of what you should be doing, right? You're 22 years old, maybe you're 26 years old, you're getting licensed, and you think to yourself, I should know exactly what I want to do and what I want to start working on. And one of the reasons that we created this interview series from the foundation is just to be able to document the journey of folks, right? And that journey, it sounds like, can take you, in different directions, and take you to some project types or some firms or some ideas that you didn't necessarily know that you wanted to do when you were in that younger, right, 22, 26 range.
Absolutely. I mean, even going to school for architecture, I did undergraduate 5-year program, and to know when you're 18 years old, what do you want to do, for the rest of your life, can be a little daunting. I think another lesson that, I've learned through the years is that you have an idea. I think when you're younger, or even just society in general has a kind of romanticized idea of architecture that's kind of painted from movies or TV and things like that. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've met that have said, I've always wanted to be an architect, And I think that we have, I think we have an idea of what it is, but we actually, when you start practicing, you realize there's so many facets to what we do, as architects. It's not necessarily exactly what you would think it would be, or you think it is based on the way TV presents it.
100%. How I Met Your Mother is one of my favorite sitcoms, and I am rewatching it right now. We just had a baby, and it's a show I've seen before, so I can turn it on and leave it in the background, and I don't worry about actually watching it. But one of the main characters, Ted Mosby, is an architect, and this is set in 2005, and they constantly show him at a drafting table. Right, he is sitting in his apartment and he is creating these amazing designs. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm pretty sure AutoCAD and Revit, all these programs were out by then, and I'm not sure he would be doing a whole lot of drafting. But that's what people think of when they think of architecture, though, right?
Absolutely. I remember that show, and I remember him presenting an entire tower by himself, and that's the falsity there.
Yes.
I think you quickly realize that, it's painted as there's the soul, you're a sole architect, and you do all the drawing and the drafting and the engineering and the construction even, and you put it all together and it's all you, and that's it. And I think what I realized, very soon into my career is that, architecture is really it's a team sport, in a way. It's a teaming exercise. Even the smallest projects have a team of people, probably a structural engineer, contractor, other types of engineers, civil probably. And so it's not, one person in one room sitting alone in the dark, drafting everything, drawing everything. We're in constant communication with a whole team of people, and that's engineers, contractors, even our fellow team members.
Right.
So it's something to know about the field of architecture, not what it's showed in the TV.
So we'll get into that, and that's a couple questions from now, but we'll talk a little bit about kind of what are the other areas of design that maybe, we are named the Architectural Foundation of San Francisco, and obviously we do serve kind of the architecture community, but the whole world of design, there's so much more to it than that. And just because you start out studying architecture doesn't even mean you need to go that route, right? It can open you up. I've talked to a number of people who started maybe on the engineering side and decided they wanted to be architects, or flipped, from that, which actually begs us kind of right into the next question, which is, what was that inspired you to pursue architecture? Was there a moment that you knew, I've heard this story where I was 7 years old and, somebody told me I should be an architect, and so I just loved to sketch and I was doing it? Or was it more of I kind of fell backwards into it type of story?
It's a little between the two. I definitely, I've heard that too. And somebody says they saw one building and they knew, it was their inspiration. For me, my father was British from England, so we used to travel there every other year or so to visit my family. And we saw a lot of buildings, a lot of architectural masterpieces, throughout England and even a little bit in Europe. So I think, it came from a family of kind of travelers in a way that wanted to have experiences in that way. In addition, my mother loved houses and kind of design. And she used to take us on a Sunday drive, show us the kind of mansions, that we'd go to the very ritziest of neighborhoods and drive around and look. So I think I got a little bit of an affinity for architecture, maybe not knowing it, doing those things. But when it came down to choosing a career, I'm pretty a practical kind of thinker. And I thought, okay, well, what are my skill sets? I love history. I like math. I love art, and what do those things kind of lend themselves to? And
right.
yeah, I realized, okay, well, actually architecture, and the more I started thinking about it, I said, okay, let me, go into this and try this. I have to admit, I definitely at that time was kind of hedging my bets,
Right.
like I was,
Common story. You'd be surprised.
yeah, I was 17 when I chose to go to school. I turned 18, when I was in school. And I thought, well, what if I don't like it? What if I'm not, I'm not good at it, all those things. But, luckily, through the first few years, I realized I was in the right field for me. So, yeah.
That's awesome. One of our very first interviews we did in the foundation was with Mark Cavagnero of Cavagnero and Associates, and he came from the East Coast, and I think his family was I don't remember his father was an engineer, but he's getting pressure to go to law school, and he was like, "I'm going to try out this architecture thing, and if it doesn't work out, I'll just go to law school." It was literally it was kind of a hedging of the bet. It's like, well, I've got a backup career picked out if I need to, but um, if you if we were talking about the students for a second and thinking about like a high school student who might be interested in architecture, what kind of advice would you give them? What classes would you want to see somebody do if you were looking to bring somebody along from that high school age? What advice would you offer them as far as classes to take or paths to go down?
I mean, as we were saying before, there's so many paths in architecture. So, you can go into construction or interiors or management, kind of more documentation or more design. So in that way, I think there are so many courses that a high schooler can take that can lead to a successful year in architecture, or successful career, I should say, in architecture. Um, I think the biggest one is obviously drafting. Everyone says that, and that's a great, because most architects do start off in a more drafting kind of documentation mode. But you can also, any type of arts classes you want to take, painting, sculpture, woodworking, those are all relevant. I think history as well can help, because architecture is a very precedent driven field. Also, the sciences and technology. I mean, there's lots of people in the field of architecture that just focus on, say, facade technology or, environmental sustainability technology. So all of those kind of courses lend themselves into becoming an architect.
Gotcha. Okay. And kind of along those same lines, is there something specific that you wish that you knew now that you're something that you know now that you could tell your younger self when you were in high school about the profession or about the journey to becoming an architect?
It's not a solo career. It's a teaming career. You're going to be teaming with people, other engineers, other architects, other contractors, other professionals. You're not going to be working by yourself in a silo. That's not going to happen. Also, I think I would tell people who are interested in architecture that there are so many facets to go into. So, you could go into the more business side of it. You can go into the design side, which I think most people think of it as. You can go into the technical side or the drawing side. There's lots of facets of the field of architecture that you can that one can fold into. I mean, in the end, we're all architects and we work together, but we each have different kind of roles and what's the right word? Skill sets
Sure.
that lend us to do these different types of work within the field of architecture.
I think that's super important. Someone else who was on this series, Patrick Mcleaney, was a CEO of HOK for a number of years, and he actually started at that firm when in St. Louis, like right out of school. And I think they told him they recognized fairly early on that he was an, let's say, above average designer, but he was a great leader. And they kind of gently nudged him in the direction of like, this is your skill set. What do you think about really being a leader? Because you have the skill set to get the most out of people, right? You can be a good designer, maybe even a great designer if you want to put the work in. But you've got this skill that maybe not everybody has, and it is valuable, right? It is incredibly valuable. It kind of leads us to our next question about being a female architect, because while we're doing, I think, a really great job of awareness and getting more women into architecture and just exposing it and making sure that people know that this is a career path, it has historically not been that way, right? I mean, the numbers are getting better and better by the year, but for a long time, this was just considered kind of a men's profession for whatever reason. Can you talk a little bit about, as a female architect, how do you utilize your voice? What does that look like? What did it look like before, and what does it look like now in 2021?
I actually did a report in college about women in architecture. And at that time, women were graduating at a 50% rate, just like doctors and lawyers, etc. However, at that time, women were not staying in the profession of architecture. And there was lots of reasons for that in general. But one of the biggest ones was a lack of like work from home situations or flexibility that other careers were actually offering. So women were not staying in the field of architecture for a lot of reasons, like I said, but that being one of them. Now I would say, now I would say 15 years later, a lot of these things have been recognized maybe better by firms. Our firm actually is over 50% women.
That's awesome.
A few women in leadership positions in our office, and actually our managing principal is a female.
Love it.
And so I think things are changing in a good way that way. But I think that for a lot of women, including myself, it can be very hard sometimes, especially when you're starting out, to find your voice, like you were talking about. Very hard to be in a room full of very experienced and smart people, architects, engineers, and feel like you have something to say, but not feeling comfortable enough, to say it out loud. And I've experienced that multiple times throughout my career. But one time that really stands out to me was when I was an intern model maker. And we were in a design mode around a model. The senior design principals were sitting around talking about, how they wanted the design to go. And they couldn't come to a solution, and I was there listening. And I just thought, I see the solution, here is the solution, but I wasn't saying anything, and having been in the situation before, I just decided, okay, this time, I got the little bravery to say, all right, I'm going to actually say something right now. And I gave my idea and everyone was silent for just a few seconds, because it may have been the first time they heard me speak. I don't know. and everyone was silent for a few seconds. And then the senior design principal said, yep, that's it. Let's model that and do that. And that's what we did. And so, it was definitely a huge kind of confidence boost. And I have had people disagree with my ideas since then, for sure. But it was also a kind of huge learning lesson for me at the time to say, okay, just put your idea out there. The worst thing that can happen is people say, no, it doesn't work. Do you know what I mean? But still, put those ideas out there. And, that's what I think, firms, like especially our firm, Co-Architects, really wants, is people from entry level to most senior contribute ideas. It makes a better project. And we all know that.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. That some ways, there's a lot going on in the world right now. We're still kind of in the tail end of a pandemic and coming out of that. And I think with the next question we're going to get into is in terms of like internships and work from home opportunity and how the whole profession is changing that way. But what you're talking about there, this kind of creating this environment where you literally can find your voice. Literally sitting in a room and are not afraid to share your thoughts and, potentially be told you're not right? Be ridiculed for them. I was talking to a guest probably a couple months ago, and he worked in San Francisco and he did a lot of restaurants, and he worked with a firm it was a nonprofit that provided capital and training for women and minorities to open restaurant businesses, because they found that that just wasn't available to them, right? It just at the same level as men, for whatever reason, it just wasn't available. So we want to provide that. And I always thought, a firm, it sounds like what you guys are doing at Co-Architects is showing people that people who look like me, who are like me, can do this too. And then, you can come up and you can find your thoughts and be able to share your ideas in a place and risk having somebody say they're not right, but also risk having somebody say, wow, like that's dead on, right? If we were going to jump in really quick, so we're sitting here in May right now, and this is prime time. And we know from having students at the foundation, a lot of college students, a lot of high school students, a lot of everybody is looking for internship type opportunities, right? In the design world. And can you talk a little bit about your experience with that, and then maybe a little bit about what Co-Architects does around internships and programs?
Silver lining of the pandemic has been that we are all kind of put into this work from home situation. And with that, it meant that we could open up, virtual internships. And we did do that last year. And we had an intern who was not in LA, and so that worked out well for us because of her expertise. But it means also from our standpoint, from a management standpoint, we have to be more organized and make sure that we understand like the kind of tasks that are going on throughout the day, et cetera.
That is real quick. I want to stop you right there because that is so incredibly important. And as we have students who are looking for internships, the feedback I hear back from management of firms is interns are so hard to deal with because they just don't do a whole lot. They don't know anything yet, and you got to babysit them. And I can't help but think, just like we were talking about leadership, it's like, well, maybe they need to be managed better, right? Like maybe we need to create better programs for them. Maybe, we can, it falls on us, not them, to make that experience better, because I know that there are firms out there that are doing this, right? It's maybe not collectively, maybe we're not there as an industry yet, but I know that there are firms out there that have amazing programs in place, and they hire some interns, and then those interns come back and they get hired when they, pass their licensing exam. And this just seems to me like that seems like such a cop out. You know what I mean? Like, oh gosh, we got to hire another intern. It's like, oh man, like these people want to learn, right?
Absolutely. I can just say it was a very successful internship, and we're doing it again this year. And we're going to be even more organized and more ready to make sure that our interns feel like they're part of our office as well, too. So yeah, it's definitely doable. There's a lot of other, virtual internships that are happening out as well, including, NOMA's pipeline. There's just their summer camp.
Yep.
That's a great organization. And also our office is looking into potentially creating more open internship kind of platform. Something that, obviously firms can only hire so many people, fiscally. But
Right.
The idea is that perhaps we can have kind of intern events or events that are more virtual that we can give back to students out there that are, looking for portfolio review or resume review or things of that nature. So our office is kind of actively looking at how we can fold into efforts like that.
Right. Right. I love that. You and I were talking a little bit off camera, the Architectural Foundation. We have pivoted and thrived in this pandemic because of virtual learning, right? We used to be a physical classroom in San Francisco, maybe 30 students at a time. They all had to come to our location to learn. In March of 2020, when the pandemic hit, we put everybody, on computers and Zoom learning. And I think we went from serving 100 students in 2019 to over 250 in 2020. And that number is increasing, actually. We just had our high school design competition. The awards were passed out over the weekend, this past weekend. And we'll do a little bit of a plug on that. But I think back to your point, the opportunities are there, right? There are plenty of people out there that want to learn and don't mind doing it virtually. Awesome. Well, Lauren, I'm going to wrap up with one more question here. which is just, if we were talking about opportunities that were not just architecture, right? If we were going to get into something besides building and home design, can you talk a little bit about kind of your experience with that and what those opportunities might be?
Yeah, I think there are several typologies of architecture out there: healthcare, housing, higher education, K through 12, commercial, retail. There's every building type out there. And I think if, in addition, there's also all types of scope within that. Maybe you go into management, maybe you go into construction, maybe you go into interiors, maybe you go into facades. There's so many aspects of the field. And I think what I would say to anybody who's looking into becoming an architect is knowing that it's not maybe as you is portrayed on the TV or in the movies, and that the field is has a wide breadth of opportunity.
That's great. That's a great place for us to leave it. Lauren, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Lauren Coles, co-architects down in Los Angeles. And thank you again, everybody, for supporting the Architectural Foundation and the interview series. Send us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Lauren, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.